Hi, welcome back to me and Mon Ami. And today we've got a bit of a different video for you because as I am sure a number of you know from watching videos that we've done recently, about 3 weeks ago my father passed away, sadly at the grand old age of 95. And it set me thinking about the whole issue of, moving abroad and having parents who are obviously getting older. I have lost both my parents while I've been living in France, although actually my mother died while I was in New York. But I know it's definitely something that is on the minds of many people who live here and still have parents or relatives or brothers or sisters back in Britain or back in the States or wherever you're from. And I know it's definitely on the minds of some of our subscribers, because when you've come in the Panda with us on the Panda tours, some of you've told me that you're longing to come and live down here in the south of France, but you can't do it, or you don't feel you can do it until your parents have passed. So in this video we're going to tell you what our experience has been over the last 20 years of dealing with parents and dealing with old age and ultimately death, and try and come to some conclusion as to whether we think we made the right decision in leaving them back in Britain and moving here to France. So we both moved to France in 2005. At that point my dad was 75, was in rude health, as was my mother. How old was your mum?
About 60-ish.
60-ish. So, you know, at that point there wasn't really any great issue. And to be honest, when I say we moved here in 2005, for the first 10 years we were between here, England and Scotland, where I was working, and I was working in other countries as well. So, you know, I was back in Britain an awful lot more.
Yeah.
I probably saw my parents, I don't know, 6-8 times a year, maybe more. Now, I should put in context that I'd left Yorkshire, where I came from, 38 years ago. So, you know, I went to university in 1987 and essentially I never really came back. So it had been a very long time since I'd lived close to them. But when I was living in London, you know, it was 2 hours on the train. If there was a hospital emergency or whatever, you could hop on the train and go there. So, you know, in 2005, everything is absolutely fine. And really, for about the first 4 or 5 years, there weren't any issues in terms of us being here and seeing our parents. By about 2010, my mother is beginning to show the first signs of dementia. So I'm having to try and help my dad and et cetera, et cetera. And they reached a point where there was no way he could cope with her anymore at home, and we had to do the dreaded dementia care home. And, you know, doing that from here was incredibly difficult, there's no doubt. And I was going back a lot, and there was all the stress of trying to help people, but knowing there was a finite amount of time, because you had to come back here because this was where you lived and that wasn't where you lived. This was where our lives were. You had an incident with your mum, didn't you, when she developed sepsis, didn't she?
Yeah, Mum was in intensive care about 15 years ago.
Right, and you rushed back.
And I had to rush back in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
My busiest time, thanks Mum. But yeah, you know, you can't time these things. Yeah, I had to rush back and see her, and fortunately she got better, but that took time, and that was not easy being far away. And
it's very, very stressful, there's no question. Yeah. Being at that distance from somebody who's very ill, and the dreaded dash to the airport and all the rest of it is, you know, is not pleasurable. And also trying to counsel people down the phone, and also trying to ascertain what's actually going on down a phone line when you can't actually see people is again, you know, something that is not easy. So anyway, my mother died in 2014. I was actually in New York doing a show, so I couldn't rush back for that, but it was dealt with on the phone, and then I came back to Yorkshire for the funeral, and obviously and all of the arrangements of that. But by that point, of course, then my dad is living by himself, so there's an even greater pressure really to try and help him and to try and get him to readjust to being single, and to try and readjust to staying in touch with people, because my dad was very much a sort of, I'm afraid it is statistically the case that men tend to be less good at coping post the death of a partner. They tend to, by and large, not make new friends as easily as women do, and that certainly was the case with my dad. I tried to arrange all kinds of things for him to go to social groups and lunch clubs and all the rest of it. He was really having none of it. He'd always been a sort of solo player, and that's how he wanted to remain. But it did mean that there was an awful lot of pressure on me, because I could sense his loneliness. And that increased as those years went on. I found it very frustrating on the one hand, because I tried to do everything in my power to help him, and he couldn't make the change to becoming a more social person. Now, luckily, he had lots of really nice neighbours, and he was still mobile, and he was still able to walk over the fields every day with the dog. And that was his life, and he would bump into people, and to be honest, his spirits were good until the winter came and the weather turned, and he couldn't go out on the fields, and he didn't see people, and I could sense his mood declining, basically because he was more and more isolated. And there came an interesting moment where, once the Brexit vote had happened, and we had obviously to make a decision about which country we were going to live in, and really and truly by this point we were absolutely people who were living here, so it had to be here. But I remember trying to explain to my dad the difficulties of it all, and why I was annoyed about it and all the rest of it. And it was at that point he sort of said, "Why don't you come home?" And I kind of was really baffled by this. I mean, I knew why he said it, I knew what he wanted, but his home wasn't my home, and hadn't been for 38 years. But I knew what he wanted. He was fearing he was getting older, and I was in a foreign land. Now, during all this time, he came to visit me quite a lot, twice a year on holiday. Your mum still comes.
Oh, yes.
And thoroughly enjoys coming. My dad thoroughly enjoyed coming. He did complain a lot. But when he went back home, he told the neighbours how much he'd enjoyed it. He just didn't really tell me. But that's Yorkshire for you. So, there was plenty of sort of seeing him and all the rest of it. In about, I think the big change came with the whole COVID situation, as it did for many people, is that he stayed in, he stopped going to the supermarket, and he kind of lost his confidence. And after that, his shopping was done by his wonderful carer. Now, I found this person in about 2015, and she's been absolutely wonderful. Donna's been fantastic for my dad, and became way more than a sort of cleaner carer. She became just a very good friend, and all the rest of it, and mediator quite often, diplomat between me and my father, as we tussled over the best decisions to make, etc. Now, after 2020, after the COVID thing, his mobility started to decrease, and then things became very, very difficult, really. And the last 18 months have not really been pleasant. And to be honest, my relationship with him became more and more strained, because I found it very, very, I was still in contact with him all the time, but I found it very, very difficult to deal with how unhappy he was, and how there was virtually nothing I could do. I mean, even if I'd gone every week to see him, which I didn't, it still wouldn't have solved the issue that he couldn't get out of the house, and he couldn't do the things he wanted to do, and the dog had died, and all of those horrible things that come with the end of life. And so he really wanted out, and luckily I did get to see him 5 days before he died. But I then came back here because I didn't think, and I actually spoke to the doctor, and she said there's no imminent danger. And of course, then suddenly neighbours were saying, I think he's on his way. And so then I booked the flight, and of course, just as I'm about to leave the house to go to the airport, the dreaded call comes from the hospital. Now, this story will be endlessly familiar to anybody who does not live within close range of their parents. And even if you do, you know, there are lots of people I've spoke to subsequent to this who've said, well, you know, we'd been with my father as much as we could. We thought we were going to be there at the point of death. We weren't, you know. And I think, you know, you have to accept that there is a certain element of fate to all this. And, you know, unless you are going to sit by a bed for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, it's very hard to know when somebody is finally going to slip away. So I wasn't there right at the end, etc. But you know, subsequent to all that, you sort of think, well, did I make the right decision to be here? Because there is no doubt that you can't, whatever way you spin it, you have chosen to live your life in a way that is perhaps not what your parents at the end of their lives would have preferred. Now, that is, again, true. It's not just about living abroad. It's true of, you know, if you, I don't know, your parents are in Leeds and you've moved to Newcastle or whatever, you know, there may be an argument from the parents to say, come back, I want you near me, and all the rest of it. And I know some people do move back to be near their parents. And obviously, so much depends upon you and the relationship you have with them. But we friends here who are in a similar situation with parents who are still alive in other countries, and you know, I think what's very difficult to deal with, it's not so much that you're in a foreign country, because telephone calls are totally possible, everything's on the internet now. It really isn't the old world where you were having to save up to make a phone call to Britain and all of that nonsense. That's gone. It's not that. It's the fact that if you go back and you decide to sacrifice, you know, to some extent, some years of your life to see them through to the end of their lives, then obviously you are taking away some good years that you will never get back of living in the place you want to live. But equally, if you stay here, or if you do decide you're going to move away and try and deal with it through carers and friends and all the rest of it, you still don't fully escape, because there is this old word called guilt. And I think anybody who's moved abroad and then has to deal with parents or whoever at a distance, I think they'd probably be lying if they said they'd never felt any guilt. And you sometimes sort of, you know, many times I've thought, God, do the neighbours who are so kind to my dad, do they think I'm literally just laid on a sunbed here in the south of France? Because they've probably seen some of the videos and think all they do is go on holiday and blah, 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 blah. You know, but of course, you know, those are our jobs. You work here, I work here. It's not, you know, in the same way as if you worked at, I don't know, if you're an insurance clerk in Newcastle, your parents would probably think, don't throw away your job to come back and look after me. You know, so, but those things do absolutely go through your mind. And I mean, you're facing now, your mum's still very well and she's still coming on visits and stuff. But, you know, I think as the stuff has unfolded with my dad these last few weeks, you know, it's inevitably made you think about,
Of course.
you know, there is a horrible inevitability about life, in that, you know, most things may never happen and this one will, that the end of life will be reached. So it's, you know, I think when people say, should you move abroad, if you've still got parents alive in Britain or relatives who you care for or who are dependent to some extent on you, I mean, the answer has to be, only you can decide, only your conscience can decide whether you are willing to sacrifice those years to go back and look after them, or whether to some extent you are placing your happiness, your freedom ahead of looking after them. Now, as I say, that's not to say you cannot care for people from a long distance. You can, but it is not the same as being able to go and see them, you know, every day, as if you live nearby. So on Tuesday we're going back to Britain, aren't we? Because I made the decision that, well, my dad didn't have a religious bone in his body. In fact, he was a super atheist. He didn't really like religion at all. So I cut the miserable crematorium visit and the hearses and all of that, and I went for the dial 1 for a direct cremation option, which felt very brutal. at the time, but to be honest, has been absolutely perfect. The ashes have been delivered on time. It's all been carried out and done. And I decided what we'd do is spend the money that we'd have wasted on the hearses for 20 people to be stood at a miserable crematorium in Dewsbury on a very nice lunch, and a lunch, more importantly, in the pub that he ran and that I grew up in, which was my childhood home, not the house where he ended up in. So we're going back on Tuesday, and you've never seen any of that, have you?
No.
You've never, oddly, even though you're from Yorkshire, you're the other side of Yorkshire, it's a different era when I was there and when you were there. Obviously, we're very similar ages. So you're going to come back and you're going to see my childhood pub, and you're going to see the house, and you're going to see where I went to school, and you're going to see some of my old school friends and some of the surviving relatives. There aren't many, very few. I've no brothers or sisters. I should have said that in the video. That neither is Mr. Boo, and that also produces an awful lot of stress, but that's a side issue. So we're going to do that and hopefully have a nice lunch and celebrate Jack's life rather than mourn the passing of somebody who'd got to 95 and for very certainly had enough. He couldn't have told me any more times that he wanted out, but that wasn't an option. So hopefully that will give us some sense of closure, and we can do scatter his ashes in the place that he wanted in the woods, where he used to walk the dog and sit on the log and chat to people, and life can move on. And you know, the weirdest thing that's happened in the last couple of weeks is that I think I'd always harboured this thing that when my dad had gone, that was it. I would be free. I would be able to be 100% in my own head here, and of course I'm nowhere near that yet, and you know, and even though it was very difficult towards the end in terms of messages between us and how sad he was, and I find that very difficult to deal with, of course I'm now missing those messages which is just insane, but I'm trying to remember the much better times when we just argue about the cricket or the football or the politics or whatever, because as my mother used to say, me and him we preferred an argument to our breakfast. We often substituted the argument for the breakfast, but so that'll be interesting, and who knows, we might even film, if you're interested, something of not the funeral, not a funeral, the lunch, but I mean something of my hometown and your reaction to my fond memories of my childhood. Dewsbury has never left me, even if I've left it. So anyway, that was the video this week. It's a little bit different, but I just thought it was kind of an interesting subject because it's something that people bring up with us all the time, and is definitely out there in the ether as a big question as to whether you should do what we've done. That's our experience. You can only make up your own mind. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like, please give us a comment, please think about buying us a coffee, but most of all, folks, remember, stay charged. Bye.